Ava Rourke stepped off the transport aircraft with a quiet confidence that almost no one noticed. The wind coming from the ocean brushed against her uniform as she walked toward the Naval Operations Base. To anyone watching, she looked like an ordinary young woman. Calm face, medium height, slim build, carrying a small duffel bag on her shoulder. Nothing about her appearance suggested she had been part of dangerous missions, long nights during enemy attacks, or operations that demanded more courage than most soldiers ever experience. But appearances can hide entire worlds. Ava had just completed a classified assignment overseas. Her team had been separated, communication cut, and threats surrounding them. She made it back, but her achievements could not be written on her uniform or spoken openly. Everything about her was confidential. So when she arrived at her new assignment, she knew no one would understand who she really was. The entrance gate guard glanced at her ID card for barely 1 second, then waved her through as if she were a regular admin worker. He didn't salute her or even look twice. Ava didn't mind. She knew this would happen again and again. Most people judged quickly, and they judged wrongly. As she walked into the base, she noticed the busy environment. Officers rushing to briefings, sailors loading equipment, instructors yelling commands at trainees. No one paid attention to her. A few soldiers glanced her way, then returned to their conversation, assuming she worked in a clerical department or maybe medical support. It always made her smile a little, but she stayed silent. A group of young officers passed by her, talking loudly. "Who's the new girl?" one of them asked. "Probably another admin assistant," the other replied. "They keep sending them every few weeks." Ava heard every word, but she didn't react. She had been trained to notice everything while remaining invisible. It was a skill that once saved her team's life. She found her assigned barracks and entered quietly. A few bunks were empty, but most were occupied. Inside, she saw four women chatting and polishing their boots. They stopped talking for a moment when she walked in. "Hey, you new here?" one of them asked. "Yes," Ava replied politely. "Just arrived." "You logistics? Or medical?" another woman questioned, assuming she was support staff. Ava shook her head gently. "No, I'm with special operations." Their expressions froze for a second, then a forced smile appeared on their faces. They didn't believe her. Many people didn't. A female Navy SEAL was rare, but a female SEAL with classified accomplishments was almost unbelievable to them. "Oh, okay," one woman said, clearly thinking Ava was joking. They went back to their conversation, ignoring her. Ava placed her bag on the bunk quietly. She never corrected anyone. She had always been taught that a SEAL's worth was measured by actions, not by explanations. Let people think whatever they wanted. Her reality was far stronger than their doubts. After settling in, she walked toward the command office to officially report. Along the way, she passed several groups of men who stared at her with confusion. She didn't look like someone who could survive harsh combat missions or complete underwater demolition training. But Ava had done both and excelled. Inside the office, a junior officer sat at a desk, typing. "Name?" he asked without looking up. "Lieutenant Ava Rourke," she said calmly. He finally looked up, surprise in his eyes. "Lieutenant? Oh, sorry. I thought maybe you were someone else." Ava understood exactly what he meant, but she nodded politely. The officer stamped her arrival papers and told her where to report next. Even though she held a higher rank than him, he barely gave her a respectful tone. As she left the office, a heavy feeling settled inside her. Not sadness, but familiarity. She had been underestimated her whole life. In training, she was underestimated. In missions, enemy forces underestimated her. Even some teammates doubted her abilities until she proved them wrong. It never stopped, no matter where she went. But Ava never let it break her spirit. She remembered her father's words from when she was a child. "Strength is not about shouting your worth. Real strength is silent, but impossible to ignore once it reveals itself." Those words guided her every day. She walked toward the training field, watching the sunshine across the base. She felt a quiet determination growing inside her. She was here for a reason. She was ready to serve again, even if no one here knew her story. Little did this base know that the woman they overlooked, the one they assumed was weak or inexperienced, had saved lives, completed missions most operatives failed, and earned respect from commanders far above their rank. They would learn soon. But Ava didn't care about recognition. She only cared about doing her duty. However, fate had its own plans for her. And the moment she arrived on that base was the beginning of a chapter that would surprise everyone, including her. For now, she moved like a shadow, unnoticed and underestimated. But the day was coming very soon, when the entire base would stand still, shocked, as one of the most powerful men in the Navy walked straight toward her and saluted her with pride. A salute that would change everything. Ava woke up early the next morning, long before most of the base had even opened their eyes. She moved quietly, almost silently, like she had been trained. After getting dressed, she walked outside and headed to the cafeteria for breakfast. The air was cool, and the sky still had soft shades of blue and pink. It was peaceful, something she didn't get often during missions. When she entered the cafeteria, she noticed a few groups of soldiers sitting together, laughing and talking loudly. As she walked past them carrying her tray, she heard whispers again. Some men stared at her with curiosity, others with doubt, and a few with amusement, as if she didn't belong in their world. One soldier nudged his friend and said in a low voice, "She looks like she couldn't lift a rifle properly." Another chuckled, "Probably here to keep files in order." Ava ignored them. Years of training had taught her how to stay calm even when people underestimated her. She found an empty table in the corner and sat down. She ate her food quietly, not inviting attention. She knew that once people found out who she really was, everything would change. But she didn't want to rush it. Respect meant more when it was earned naturally. As she ate, a group of officers walked past her table. They were discussing a recent mission report. "I heard the team got destroyed out there," one officer said. "Yeah, except for one operative who somehow managed to extract the injured men," another responded. "No way. One person did all that?" A third questioned. "That's what the report said." A single operator held the enemy back for almost an hour. Ava listened without raising her head. She knew exactly which mission they were talking about, hers. She remembered the sounds of gunfire, the smoke, the fear in her teammates' eyes, and how she pushed through the chaos to bring every injured soldier to safety. But she didn't say anything. She kept eating like the story meant nothing to her. After breakfast, she headed toward the outdoor training area. As she approached, she noticed several trainees gathered around, stretching and warming up. An instructor saw Ava and immediately pointed her toward the back of the group. "Support staff stands back. We're running advanced drills today," he said, not even giving her a chance to speak. Ava wanted to explain, but then she stopped herself. Correcting him would make her look desperate for recognition. She didn't want that. She simply nodded and stepped aside. The instructor continued shouting commands, and the trainees started doing intense drills, running with heavy gear, climbing ropes, and performing tactical movements. Ava watched quietly, analyzing their form. She could see mistakes instantly. Their timing was off, their breathing was uneven, and some lost balance during jumps. A few soldiers noticed Ava standing to the side and smirked. "She looks bored," one whispered. "Maybe she wants to join, but this stuff is too tough for her," another joked. Ava heard it all clearly, but she kept her face calm. She wasn't angry. She was used to it. Most people believed strength looked loud, big muscles, aggressive attitude, loud confidence. They never imagined strength could be quiet too. Then something unexpected happened. One of the trainees slipped from the rope climb and fell badly, landing on his shoulder. He groaned in pain. People rushed toward him, unsure what to do. The instructor panicked slightly, shouting for a medic. Ava stepped forward calmly. "I can help," she said. The instructor looked at her skeptically. "You? Are you trained for this?" Ava didn't answer with words. She knelt beside the injured trainee and quickly checked his shoulder position, his breathing, and whether he could move his fingers. Her hands moved fast and confidently. She stabilized his arm with a technique only field-trained operatives knew. The pain on the trainee's face eased almost instantly. Everyone stared at her, surprised. "Where did you learn that?" someone asked. Ava responded simply, "Experience." The medic arrived a minute later and checked the trainee. "Who did the stabilization?" he asked in surprise. "She did," the instructor replied, pointing at Ava. The medic looked impressed. "Perfect work. Whoever trained you did a good job." Ava only nodded. But inside, she felt a small warmth. She had finally done something noticeable, even if they still didn't understand her full story. As the injured soldier was taken away, the group continued their drills. This time, several soldiers glanced back at Ava more often. They didn't say anything, but their expressions had changed slightly, from amusement to curiosity. Later in the day, she walked past two officers who were still discussing the mysterious operative from that mission report. "Whoever that operator is, they're a legend," one said. "Wish we had someone like that here," the other replied. Ava's steps slowed for a moment. She wanted to smile at the irony, but she controlled her expression. It wasn't time to reveal anything yet. She continued walking, blending into the background like she always had. She wasn't the type to brag or correct people. She believed real strength didn't need loud introductions. It revealed itself at the right moment when it mattered most. And that moment was coming soon. The base had no idea that the woman they whispered about, underestimated, and ignored was the same person they praised without knowing her name. Ava was calm. She knew that sooner or later, the truth would step into the light, just like she always did in the middle of a mission. And when that happened, the entire base would finally understand who she really was. The next morning, the base was louder than usual. Trucks moved across the yard. Instructors shouted orders, and the sound of boots hitting the ground filled the air. Ava walked toward the training grounds quietly, blending into the noise like she always did. She didn't draw attention, and she didn't want to. But today, something different was waiting for her. When she reached the training area, the senior instructor blew his whistle loudly. "All right, listen up. Today we are doing advanced combat drills. These drills are only for operators, not for support staff." A few soldiers turned their heads and looked at Ava. Some smirked. Others whispered, "There she is again. She'll be sitting this one out for sure. She should just watch and take notes." Ava ignored all of it. She stepped aside and stood near the fence, her hands behind her back, her eyes calm. She had been through drills 10 times harder than this. Drills done in the middle of the night under enemy fire or while carrying injured teammates. But she didn't say a word. The instructor continued, "Only those approved for high-risk missions can join this drill. Everyone else stands back." Ava already knew what would happen. She wouldn't be chosen. Her records were classified. Her achievements were hidden. The instructors didn't know who she really was, so they assumed she wasn't qualified. And she didn't correct them. She watched as the trainees lined up. Strong men, tall men, men with loud confidence. They looked at her as if she didn't belong among them. A few gave her a pitying smile. One of them even said softly to his friend, "Poor girl. She probably wants to prove something." His friend chuckled. "Let her watch. She might learn something." Ava stood silently, her expression unreadable. She wasn't offended. She wasn't hurt. She was simply patient. The whistle blew again. The operators ran forward, jumping over walls, crawling under obstacles, balancing on beams, and firing at targets. Their breaths were heavy, their movements fast, their steps full of effort. They were trying their best, but Ava could see every mistake instantly. One soldier leaned too much during a roll. Another swung his rifle too wide. One paused too long at a corner. Another forgot to check his blind spot. Ava noticed every detail like a machine. Her eyes followed their patterns, predicting their next moves, spotting where they would slip or miss. She had spent years training herself to move perfectly, even when exhausted, injured, or scared. Her skills were sharpened in real missions, not in safe training grounds. But she stayed quiet. After several rounds, the instructor shouted, This is not good enough. Your form is sloppy. Your timing is off. Do it again. The trainees groaned but obeyed. Ava watched, her mind replaying each drill automatically. She could do these movements in her sleep. She remembered the time she had completed a similar drill in half the required time, blindfolded while carrying a wounded teammate on her back. But no one here knew that. Then the instructor asked, "Anyone think they can do better?" A couple of men stepped forward, bragging loudly about their skills. Ava didn't move. She didn't step forward. She didn't need to prove anything. But the instructor noticed her standing in the back. "You," he said, pointing at Ava. "Since you're always watching, do you want to try?" Everyone turned toward her. Some smiled mockingly. Some whispered. Some crossed their arms, waiting to enjoy the show. Ava didn't react. "I'm fine standing here," she said calmly. "Oh, come on." One soldier laughed. "Let her try. What's the harm? We could use a little entertainment." "Yeah." Another added, "Show us what you got." The instructor shrugged. "Suit yourself. If you don't want to, that's fine." Ava simply nodded. But the whispers didn't stop. Figures. She knew she can't handle it. She'd slow everyone down. Ava remained calm. She didn't get angry. Instead, she studied their movements even more carefully. She knew that one day, soon, she would need to step up. And when that time came, she wanted to be ready. The drill restarted. The operators ran again. This time one soldier misjudged a jump and nearly fell. Another lost his balance on a beam. A third took too long to switch positions. Ava's instincts kicked in. She imagined correcting their steps, guiding their stances, adjusting their weight shifts. But she didn't speak. It wasn't her place yet. Suddenly, the same soldier who slipped earlier got tangled during a crawl and hit his knee hard. He yelled in pain. The drill stopped. People rushed to help. Ava walked forward naturally. "I can check his knee," she said softly. The instructor sighed but allowed her. Ava knelt, checked the soldier's joint, examined the swelling and helped him stand. Again, her movements were smooth, controlled, professional. The soldier looked at her with surprise. "You know what you're doing," he whispered. Ava simply said, "A little." As the injured soldier was helped away, the trainees looked at her differently. Not with respect yet, but with curiosity. Something about her calmness and confidence didn't match their assumptions. Even the instructor watched her for a moment longer than before. Ava stepped back again, returning to her quiet place near the fence. She didn't smile. She didn't boast. But inside her, she felt a shift, just a small one. People were starting to notice her. They didn't understand her yet, but they were paying attention. And soon, the whole base, every officer, every trainee, every commander, would witness something unforgettable. Because Ava's moment of truth was coming. And when she finally revealed her real strength, no one would ever overlook her again. The sun was high in the sky when Ava entered the operations room later that day. The room was busy, filled with officers discussing missions, reviewing maps, and typing reports. Papers were scattered everywhere, printers humming, phones ringing, and people rushing in and out. It was the kind of organized chaos Ava was used to from her missions. She walked in quietly, planning only to submit her arrival documents. She didn't want attention. She didn't want questions. She simply wanted to follow the rules and disappear into her work. As she stood near the corner waiting for the officer in charge to notice her, something unexpected happened. A tall stack of classified mission files slid off a desk and landed on the floor. Papers scattered everywhere. A lieutenant rushed over, annoyed, and started picking them up. "Great. Just what I needed today," he grumbled. Ava bent down to help him gather the sheets. She reached for a file marked with a red stripe that read Confidential, Level 4. As she picked it up, her heart paused for a split second. She knew that file. It was the mission she had completed just weeks ago, the one no one here knew about. The lieutenant grabbed the file from her hand, opened it, and laughed. "Who is this our operative who took down a whole insurgent group alone?" he said loudly, making sure people around him heard. A few officers lifted their heads. Must be some giant, one joked. Probably a man with 20 years of experience, another said. Maybe even a legend, a third added. Ava remained silent, her eyes calm, but inside, memories rushed back. She remembered the night of that mission. The darkness, the smell of smoke, the sharp sounds of enemy footsteps. She remembered how she moved carefully through the abandoned building, how she fought, how she rescued the injured men trapped inside, how she refused to back down even when surrounded. She remembered how tired she was afterward, how she waited alone in a safe house until extraction arrived. Yes, she was Ava Rourke, but no one here knew. The lieutenant flipped through the pages, amused. Look at this, says the operative took out 8 armed men solo. Who even does that? Another officer laughed. Someone built like a tank. Yeah, a younger one added, glancing at Ava briefly. Definitely not someone small and, well, like her. A few chuckles followed. Ava didn't flinch. She didn't comment. She didn't correct them. She simply helped stack the papers neatly on the desk without saying a word. But deep inside, she felt a strange mix of amusement and sadness. It was funny how wrong they were. It was sad how quickly people judged. The lieutenant finally noticed she was standing there with her documents. Oh, right. What do you need? He asked, clearly assuming she was delivering papers. I'm here to complete my reporting, Ava said politely. He nodded lazily. Leave it on the table. We'll sort it later. He didn't even bother reading her name. He didn't ask her rank. He didn't show interest. Ava placed the documents down and stepped away. The officers went right back to discussing the mysterious operative, AR. One of them shook his head in admiration. I'd give anything to meet this person, he said. Ava paused at the doorway for a moment. She could have turned around and said, I'm AR. She could have shown them proof. But she didn't. She left quietly. As she walked through the hallway, she thought about her training. A true SEAL didn't brag. A true SEAL didn't need applause. A true SEAL let actions speak, not words. Still, there was something almost painful about watching people laugh and talk about her like she was some mythical figure, completely unaware that she was standing right in front of them. On her way out, 2 younger soldiers were standing by the water dispenser, whispering. I heard AR saved a whole platoon once, one said. The other's eyes widened. For real? That's what I heard. Dude must be unstoppable. Yeah. Someone like that scares even generals. Ava felt the corner of her mouth lift slightly. They were scared of the legend. They ignored the real person. As she continued walking, she replayed the mission in her mind. It wasn't a story she was proud of because it was heroic. It was something she did because she had to. People needed help. There was no time for fear. She acted because hesitation meant death. She knew the officers would never imagine that the quiet woman who passed them in the hallway was the same person they were talking about. When Ava reached the exit door, she took a deep breath. She wasn't frustrated. She wasn't angry. But she was aware of one thing. The truth always comes out, whether you speak it or not. And soon, when the right moment came, these same people who doubted her, mocked her, and overlooked her would see exactly who she really was. They would see why a 4-star general respected her. They would see why her name was whispered in command rooms. They would see the truth behind the initials AR. And their laughter would disappear. Because once someone witnesses real strength, they never forget it. The days passed slowly, but the whispers around the base grew louder. Almost everyone had heard bits and pieces about the mysterious SEAL operative who had carried out impossible missions. No one knew the identity, no one knew the face, and no one even imagined the truth. That the person they talked about was Ava, the quiet girl they overlooked every single day. Ava walked across the base with her usual calmness. She kept her eyes forward, her steps quiet, and her presence small. It was almost funny to her how invisible she could become, even while being the center of so many conversations. Conversations that people didn't realize were about her. One afternoon, she entered the gear room to clean and organize her equipment. As she worked silently, a group of soldiers stood near the racks discussing the same story that had been spreading like wildfire. Did you hear the latest? one soldier said in a dramatic voice. What now? Another asked, half laughing. They're saying AR once held off a full ambush for 40 minutes alone. A soldier sitting on a bench raised his eyebrows. No way. That sounds like movie stuff. That's what the report says, the first soldier insisted. 40 minutes. Alone. While protecting injured teammates. Ava paused for a second, her hand resting on the strap of her gear. She knew exactly which moment they were talking about. She remembered the pitch-black night, the bullets hitting the stone walls, the fear in the eyes of the wounded men she protected. She remembered how she didn't think about surviving. She only thought about getting them home. But she didn't join the conversation. She simply continued cleaning her gear. One of the soldiers glanced at her and smirked. Hey, new girl, he said. You ever hear of this AR legend? Ava looked up politely. A little. You think someone like that exists? He asked, smiling as if the story was just another rumor. Ava thought for a moment, then replied, Anyone can surprise you. The soldiers laughed, shaking their heads. One of them muttered, Yeah, well, definitely not you. Ava didn't react. She had heard worse things before. People often judged without thinking. They saw weakness where there was strength. They saw small and missed skilled. They saw quiet and forgot dangerous. Later that day, Ava walked toward the shooting range. She wanted to practice alone, but the area was crowded. Several officers were testing rifles, and a few trainees were joking around loudly. When Ava stepped in, one of them looked at her rifle and laughed. That gun's bigger than she is. Be careful. She might fall backward when it kicks. Another joked. A few laughed. A few didn't care. No one took her seriously. Ava walked to the far end of the range without responding. She set her stance, checked her rifle, and adjusted the scope. Her movements were smooth, professional, practiced, but no one noticed. Then someone shouted, Hey, Ava, you sure you know how to use that thing? Ava didn't turn. She just breathed out slowly, aimed, and fired. The bullet hit the target dead center. The room went silent for a second. She fired again. Another perfect shot. Then another. And another. Every bullet hit the exact same spot, so precise it looked like one single hole in the target sheet. The trainees stared, their mouths half open. Who taught her that? One whispered. Ava put her rifle down quietly and walked away as if nothing special had happened. The whispers spread even faster now. Rumors mixed with confusion. People didn't understand her, and that only made them more curious. That evening, Ava walked past a group of soldiers sitting outside, talking in low voices. You know, one of them said, I heard the legend is a woman. What? No way. Seriously. Someone in command said AR is a female SEAL. The others burst into laughter. There's no way a woman did all that, one scoffed. Yeah, the story would be unbelievable enough if a man did it. Exactly. They always exaggerate things. Ava felt a small sting inside her, not because they doubted her abilities, but because they doubted what women could do at all. She didn't stop walking, but her mind drifted back to the missions she survived. The times she had carried injured teammates twice her size. The nights she had fought through pain, fear, and darkness. She wasn't strong because she wanted to prove anything. She was strong because she had to be. And yet here she was, in a place where people treated her as if she didn't matter. But she remained patient. She wasn't angry. She knew that truth had its own timing. Deep down, she also sensed something was coming. Something big. Something that would shift everything around her. The rumors, the whispers, the jokes. Soon they wouldn't be laughing. The next morning, she woke up early again. She felt something in the air. A strange tension she couldn't explain. When she stepped outside, she noticed officers moving quickly. Radios buzzed with messages. Vehicles moved with urgency. People looked confused. A loud announcement echoed across the base. All personnel prepare for inspection. A senior official is arriving. Repeat. A senior official is arriving. Everyone rushed to their positions, straightening uniforms and cleaning the area. Ava didn't know who was coming, but she could feel in her gut that this moment would matter. She had no idea just how much. Very soon, the entire base would discover the truth behind the name AR. And when that happened, no one would ever overlook her again. The next morning, the base was buzzing with unusual energy. Officers and trainees rushed from one place to another, carrying folders, checking lists, and adjusting uniforms. Even the air seemed sharper, heavier somehow, as if something important was about to happen. Ava noticed the unusual tension as she walked across the yard, her footsteps calm but alert. She had seen bases under pressure during missions, but this was different. This pressure was something official, something that came from above. A loud voice came over the intercom, crisp and commanding. All personnel, assemble in the main hall immediately. Repeat. All personnel, assemble in the main hall immediately. A 4-star general is arriving. The words echoed across the base, and every soldier immediately snapped to attention. Men who had been joking and whispering moments ago now moved quickly, checking their appearance, straightening jackets, polishing boots. Trainees who were leaning lazily against walls suddenly stood up, nervous. Officers hurried to organize the seating, making sure everything looked perfect. Ava paused for a moment, watching. She could see the chaos in the efficiency, people trying desperately to look ready for someone powerful. She didn't hurry. She didn't need to. She had no illusions about impressing anyone. But she did notice the same people who had ignored or underestimated her now walking past her, directing her to help move chairs or clean the stage. "Hey, Rourke," one officer called out. "Can you help arrange these chairs?" Ava nodded politely, doing exactly what she was asked. She knew her role. She wasn't here to argue, and she wasn't here to show off. Her work was quiet, precise, and efficient, just like everything she had done in her missions. She moved carefully, placing chairs in neat rows, adjusting the spacing so it would look perfect. Every movement was controlled, every step intentional. As she worked, she overheard officers whispering to each other. "Do you know who's coming?" one asked nervously. "A 4-star general," another replied. One of the highest-ranking officers in the Navy. "This is serious." "Yeah," the first one said. "We have to make everything perfect. No mistakes. If he sees chaos." Ava kept moving, pretending not to hear. But inside, she felt a sense of anticipation building. Something told her that today would be different. Not for her, but for the people who thought they understood her. Once the chairs were arranged, she stepped back, making sure everything was in place. She glanced at the hall and saw officers and trainees taking their positions, some fidgeting nervously. She could hear the murmurs. "Who's that girl? She looks so calm. Doesn't she realize the general is coming? She's probably just lucky to be here. Don't worry about her." Ava allowed herself a tiny smile. Luck had nothing to do with it. She had prepared her whole life for moments like this, even if she didn't know it yet. The doors to the hall suddenly opened with a heavy push, and a hush fell over the entire room. People stopped moving, frozen in anticipation. Ava turned slightly, curious, but she remained calm. Everyone's eyes were drawn toward the entrance, and whispers quickly turned into silence. The general stepped in. His presence was commanding, undeniable. He wore the uniform of a 4-star Navy officer, covered in medals, with a confident stride that made people stand straighter automatically. Heads turned, eyes widened, and a collective tension filled the air. This was not just a visitor. This was a man whose very presence demanded attention and respect. He scanned the room slowly, his eyes moving over every officer, every trainee, every corner of the hall. People tried to maintain perfect composure, some too rigid, some too nervous. Ava felt a strange calm as he approached. He wasn't looking at her, or so it seemed at first. Then suddenly he stopped. The general's gaze fell directly on Ava. The entire room seemed to pause for a fraction of a second, as if the air itself had noticed. He didn't look at the officers standing at attention. He didn't glance at the decorated trainees. He looked at her. Ava's heart remained steady, but inside a quiet recognition sparked. She had a feeling he already knew who she was, even if the others did not. The general began to walk toward her, his steps purposeful and deliberate. The room remained silent. Whispers had vanished. Every eye followed him, confusion and curiosity mixing on faces all around. As he approached, Ava stood perfectly still. She didn't flinch, she didn't shift. Her training had taught her to hold her ground, to remain calm in the face of unexpected pressure. And now, standing here in front of the highest-ranking officer in the Navy, she did exactly that. The general stopped a few feet away. Slowly, deliberately, he snapped a perfect salute. Every muscle in his body was controlled, his eyes focused, and his expression serious but proud. Ava's eyes met his. The room went completely silent, as if holding its breath. Ava returned the salute. It was quiet, precise, and formal, the way trained officers salute, but there was also a subtle pride in her stance. The officers and trainees around them were frozen, some staring in disbelief, some whispering under their breath, trying to make sense of the scene. "Lieutenant Rourke," the general said loudly, his voice clear and commanding, "it's an honor to finally meet the hero who saved my men." The room went still. Faces that had ignored her, mocked her, and underestimated her now showed shock and awe. They realized all at once that the quiet girl they overlooked every day was not just competent. She was extraordinary. Ava remained composed, returning the general's respect with humility. She didn't need to speak more. The salute, the recognition, and the general's acknowledgement were enough to communicate everything. The energy in the hall had shifted completely. The whispers of doubt and mockery were replaced by awe, curiosity, and respect. And in that moment, Ava understood something fundamental. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone except the people who mattered, and the general already knew. That day, everyone in the hall learned a lesson that would stick with them forever. True strength doesn't ask for attention. True courage doesn't demand recognition. And sometimes, the person you overlook the most is the one who commands the highest respect. Ava had not changed. She was still the same quiet, calm, and efficient SEAL operative she had always been. But the world around her had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hall was completely silent. Every officer, sailor, and trainee stood frozen in place. Ava's heart remained steady, but her mind raced with quiet awareness. She had seen situations like this before during missions. Chaos around her, everyone panicking, but she had to remain calm. Now, in the midst of this tense silence, she knew something extraordinary was happening. The four-star general, Marcus Hunt, had walked past dozens of officers standing at attention without even glancing at them. They had all been preparing to impress him, polishing boots, straightening uniforms, trying desperately to show competence. None of it mattered. His eyes were locked on Ava. Every step he took seemed deliberate, filled with weight and purpose. The hall seemed to shrink as he approached her. Ava did not move. She did not try to greet him or call attention to herself. She simply stood, composed, letting the moment unfold. She had learned over years of missions that recognition was not something to chase. It came naturally when the work was done right. She had completed impossible tasks in far more dangerous conditions, and still she had never sought acknowledgement. The general stopped directly in front of her. His gaze was sharp but not harsh, commanding but filled with quiet respect. He snapped a perfect military salute, precise and formal, the kind only someone of his rank could execute with that weight of authority and sincerity. The entire hall seemed to hold its breath. For a moment, it was as if time itself paused. Ava's fingers instinctively tightened at her sides, then relaxed. She returned the salute, crisp and precise, matching his form. The general's eyes didn't just acknowledge her presence. They recognized her achievements, her courage, and her skill. He could see everything she had done, even the missions that were officially classified. He could see her determination, her discipline, and her quiet strength. "Lieutenant Rourke," he said loudly, so everyone could hear, "it's an honor to finally meet the hero who saved my men." Every eye in the room widened. Officers who had mocked her, ignored her, and assumed she was insignificant froze in shock. Trainees whispered under their breath, trying to process what was happening. The quiet girl they had overlooked every day was not only a skilled SEAL, but she was the very hero the general had just publicly recognized. Ava's expression remained calm. She did not smile excessively, nor did she bow her head. She simply stood with the confidence of someone who had completed every mission, faced every danger, and survived every challenge. Her posture, her calmness, her measured movements spoke volumes. In that single moment, her reputation, which had been invisible to most, became undeniable. Some officers looked at each other in disbelief. "That's her?" one whispered. "Are you serious?" another asked. "Yes, that's Rourke. That's AR," a third muttered, finally realizing the truth. The general lowered his hand from the salute but kept his eyes on Ava. His voice carried authority and pride. "I have been waiting to meet you in person. Your actions during your last mission saved lives, and today, the entire Navy should know the courage you have displayed." Ava nodded slightly. "Thank you, sir," she said quietly. Her voice was steady, confident, and without arrogance. She did not need to elaborate. The general's acknowledgement said everything. The room remained silent, but the atmosphere had shifted completely. The officers who had once whispered about her lack of strength now stared in awe. Those who assumed she couldn't handle the training, who joked about her size, who ignored her presence. All of them were suddenly forced to confront the reality of her capability. Ava thought briefly about her journey. She remembered the times she had been underestimated during training, the moments in missions when enemy forces thought she was weak, and the nights she had spent alone planning and executing operations under impossible conditions. Each of those experiences had shaped her, but none of them had prepared her for the thrill of this recognition, not because she sought it, but because it came so unexpectedly. The general's voice rang out again, addressing the hall. "Let this be a lesson to everyone present. True strength does not demand attention. True courage does not announce itself. And sometimes, the person you overlook is the one whose actions save lives and earn the highest respect." The officers shifted uneasily, realizing the truth in his words. They had all been so focused on appearances and assumptions that they had failed to see the person standing in front of them. Now, in one simple moment, their perceptions had changed forever. Ava felt a strange calmness wash over her. She had never sought praise, never desired it, and yet, here it was, unmistakable, undeniable. She could see the respect forming in the eyes of those around her, the surprise, and even the shame in some of the more skeptical officers. But she didn't dwell on it. She simply returned the general's gaze with professionalism and quiet pride. For Ava, this moment was not about proving herself. It was a confirmation of everything she had always known. Her work, her discipline, her courage. These things mattered more than any rumor, any opinion, any whisper. Recognition, when it came, was just the natural outcome of a life lived with purpose and commitment. The general finally stepped back, giving her a respectful nod. Ava lowered her hand from the salute. The hall, once filled with whispers, mockery, and doubt, now brimmed with a deep, silent respect. Everyone in the room had witnessed something extraordinary, not just her skill, but the quiet power of a person who had been overlooked for too long. In that single, unforgettable moment, the entire base learned a truth they would never forget. Underestimating someone based on appearance or assumptions can lead to missing the extraordinary. And the quiet girl they had ignored, the one who had walked past them unnoticed for weeks, was more than capable of commanding respect, even from the highest-ranking officer in the Navy. Ava remained composed, calm, and disciplined, just as she had always been. But the world around her had changed forever. The room was filled with a strange mix of silence and awe. Officers, trainees, and even seasoned veterans stood frozen, realizing they had underestimated someone who had quietly moved among them for weeks. Ava's calm eyes met General Hunt's for a moment, and in that glance, there was mutual respect, acknowledgement, and understanding. She didn't need to say much. Her posture, her disciplined stance, and the subtle confidence in her eyes said everything. The general cleared his throat, and his voice filled the hall. "Let everyone here understand something important," he said. looking directly at the assembled personnel. Lieutenant Ava Rourke is a living example of courage, discipline, and skill. Her actions during classified missions have saved lives. More than once. She carried out assignments that most operators would consider impossible. And she did all of it without seeking recognition or praise. The officers and trainees around the room exchanged glances. Many of them had spoken about her dismissively, laughed at her, and assumed she was just another inexperienced newcomer. Now, hearing the general speak, they realized how wrong they had been. Whispers of doubt turned into stunned silence. Some shook their heads, struggling to process the truth. The quiet, overlooked woman they had ignored was not just capable. She was extraordinary. Ava stood still, listening. She did not interrupt. She did not bow or exaggerate her presence. She had never been one to boast. Throughout her missions, she had learned that strength was shown through actions, not words. Respect came when it was earned, not demanded. And now it had come, not from her peers, but from one of the highest authorities in the Navy. General Hunt walked a few steps closer. His gaze softened slightly, still filled with admiration. Lieutenant Rourke, you've shown every one of us what true courage looks like. The Navy is proud to have you, and today, we honor you not just for your accomplishments, but for the example you set for every person in this room. He handed her a citation, the medal catching the light from above. It wasn't the first recognition Ava had received in her life, but this one was different. This recognition was public, and it carried the weight of everyone who had doubted her. She accepted it with quiet dignity, her hands steady, her posture firm. The moment seemed to stretch, the hall completely still, as officers and trainees absorbed the reality. Some had tears in their eyes, tears of awe, respect, or perhaps shame for misjudging her. Others simply stared, their mouths slightly open, realizing they had been wrong all along. They had overlooked her strength, intelligence, and courage because of appearances and assumptions, and now the truth could not be ignored. Ava looked around the room, her calm gaze sweeping over every officer and trainee. She didn't speak harshly, nor did she gloat. Instead, her eyes communicated confidence, humility, and resolve. She had never needed recognition to validate her abilities, but seeing the moment unfold, she felt a quiet satisfaction. It wasn't about them finally understanding her. It was about the fact that truth always had its moment. The general's voice broke the silence again. Let this day serve as a reminder to all of us. Judgments based on appearances or assumptions can be costly. The person you underestimate may be the one who carries the day, who saves lives, and who demonstrates the highest level of courage. Lieutenant Rourke has proven that silently, consistently, and with unmatched skill. The officers and trainees straightened instinctively, as if absorbing not just the general's words but the weight of the lesson. The room was no longer a place of whispers and doubt. It was a place of respect, admiration, and inspiration. Everyone present had witnessed something remarkable. A hero, previously invisible, commanding respect simply by being herself. Ava lowered her gaze slightly, acknowledging the honor with a humble nod. She did not seek applause, but the quiet acknowledgement from the general and the hushed awe around her was enough. She had always believed that courage needed no audience, that actions spoke louder than words, and now, everyone could see the truth for themselves. As the ceremony concluded, the atmosphere shifted subtly. Officers who had once ignored her approached her with tentative respect, some offering quiet congratulations. Trainees lingered, observing her carefully, hoping to learn from the example she set. The whispers of doubt had vanished, replaced by a newfound appreciation for someone who had quietly achieved greatness without announcing it. Ava walked back toward her station with the same calmness she always carried. Nothing about her had changed. She was still disciplined, still quiet, still focused. But the way others saw her had transformed completely. They no longer overlooked her. They no longer doubted her. And most importantly, they now understood what true courage looked like. Quiet, consistent, and unwavering. That day left a lasting impact on the base. The officers and trainees would remember it forever. The moment the quiet SEAL girl who had been overlooked finally received the recognition she deserved, they would remember the lesson. Strength is not loud, courage does not demand applause, and heroes often move silently, unseen, until the moment the world finally recognizes them. Ava returned to her duties, her calm expression unchanging. She didn't need validation, but the acknowledgement was a reminder that patience, discipline, and quiet determination always mattered. She had stayed true to herself, and in doing so, she had earned not only the respect of one of the most powerful men in the Navy, but the lasting admiration of everyone who had doubted her. And with that, the base would never forget her. Ava had proven that being overlooked did not make someone weak. It only made their eventual triumph all the more undeniable.